Good morning, everybody. Welcome to our Employee Tech Trends in Hospitality for 2025 webinar. My name is Jamie. I'm Commercial Director of CPL Learning, part of the Access business, and I'm joined by two industry leaders, people leaders in Lee and Oli, who I will hand over to introduce themselves far more ably than I can. So, Lee, over to you first of all.
Hi everyone, my name's Lee. I've worked in the hospitality industry and HR for, let's say, 30 years. Currently choosing where I go next.
And what about a bit of background, Lee, in terms of maybe give people a little bit of your vast expertise?
So I've worked predominantly in the larger companies. So worked in Scottish and Newcastle, Whitbread, Spirit, M&B, Stonegate. So some of the big companies, predominantly in HR generalist and L&D, and then just was looking up to have a few months recently in Arc Inspirations, a smaller bar business, and I think my expertise probably lies in that career development and creating paths for career development.
Cool, thanks, Lee. Oli, over to you.
Hello, everyone. Thanks for tuning in. My name is Oli. I'm Head of People and Engagement at Pizza Pilgrims, who hopefully you have heard of. My background, so I've always been in hospitality. Started more in recruitment. So from recruitment agency, I then joined Five Guys when we launched in the UK. So I did a couple of years there and then went over to Honest Burgers. So stayed with the burger theme, got a nickname of Burger Boy, and spent a good kind of 6 years at Honest. And then I did a short stint with Gail's Bakery for joining Pizza Pilgrims about a year and a half ago now.
Cool, great, thanks, Oli. So I think for anyone watching and listening in, that's a pretty amazing CV on both parts for us to kind of draw some experience from. So the aim for today is to kind of talk through employee technology more broadly. There's quite a lot to cover. It's a broad subject matter. Clearly, we could spend probably an hour talking specifically about one kind of discipline of it. So we're going to run through, just for those watching, so kind of the broad agenda is going to be on some of the themes around technology and people processes, the age-old debate of tech and human interaction, or lack of human interaction potentially, and also a little bit in AI as well. I know Oli's got some specific bits to share in and around kind of AI development, and I think it's probably a good area for people to kind of probably hear a little bit more about what that actually means, because I think it's probably a little bit of an abstract thing for a lot of people in the industry as to what does it actually mean when we are running people-focused businesses and serving people, as to how AI is going to help us. So but we'll start with employee experience as kind of the starting point for discussion, and maybe from that kind of point of recruitment, what role is tech playing now in employee experience at that point from recruitment, Oli? And then maybe, just as we are talking about trends, what are those things that you expect and want to see to kind of support that employee experience kind of on a digital basis from recruitment onwards? You're just on mute there, Oli, sorry.
Typical schoolboy. I guess from recruitment, obviously there's a lot out there, and I think there's a lot being trialed at the moment as well. Ultimately, in my mind and my vision, it's about the efficiency of applying for a job, and making sure that there's a bit of transparency from an employer brand piece, so candidates are able to see and get a sense of company, of a role, really, really clearly. And then how simple is it for someone to apply? I think where we've seen maybe 10 years ago, there was a lot of processes, and every click of the button, you're going to lose a certain percentage of people applying for your role. So how do you make it really, really simple and easy for someone to make an application to your business is really, really key. So choosing the right tech to be able to do that from an ATS platform perspective, but also, how do you want people to apply as well? So from a hiring manager, I know there's like the video applications and applying through TikTok, which are the new and the latest kind of trends. But at the same time, 50% of those applications won't be coming from people who are actually on TikTok. So you've got to be able to apply your strategy and methods to suit, all demographics at the same time. So
do you utilize? Sorry to cut across you there, Ollie. Do you utilize TikTok or anything like that, or is that kind of maybe a bridge too far? How are you? What kind of tech do you use in that space?
So, I mean, from a TikTok space, we're actually just about to trial it, actually. So we're looking into it and how that's going to work and how we can capture more people. So we've got a new opening, our first in Scotland. So, and that's going to be February. So we're going to try it just to get more brand awareness through TikTok, to get the right demographics who would normally apply to us. But we'll use other avenues as well. But certainly social media recruitment in terms of Instagram adverts, quite familiar with. And I think what I've seen is you can really increase the amount of people visiting your careers page through social media campaigns. So if you've got a new opening, or if you've got a higher number of roles in one city, for example, London, I think the use of social media, capturing the right demographics, is really, really great for recruitment. But at the same time, I don't think that means you can not rely on your Indeeds and the job boards, which are also so familiar with many of us in the industry as well.
Okay, great. So, and I suppose one thing I'm kind of keen to make sure we touch on for everyone listening in is that technology is often always comes with a cost broadly, and sometimes there's quite a time burden to be engaged with something. Not everyone necessarily has that budget or kind of capability. But the kind of key theme there would be, no matter what you're doing, keep it simple. But equally, the blocker for utilizing those social channels, there's no blocker, the barrier to entry is there. Anyone can do that, with a little bit of time, but then, it's not hard to do. So it's quite a broad opportunity for lots of people to tap into as a trend to kind of find new and different people. What about then in terms of the kind of experience within the business? What kind of things and what trends are you seeing in terms of engaging in teams as they kind of onboard and become, they've got a job? What happens then?
So I think the most important thing is how productive do you make someone, and what's the speed? So what's the efficiency to make someone productive in their role? And that's from anything from making sure that you're engaging with them from the offer to day one. So a little text message or other emails and the messages and the onboarding paperwork, that they all tell a story. So you're almost training them and you're embedding them into the culture leading up to that first day. And then from the first day, really through to the first 90 days, really. And I know Lee will probably touch on this in a minute, but that training part and how do you embed them into a culture? How do you make sure that they're learning the health and safety through to job specs, through to menu specs, etc., as fast as possible? Because that would obviously lead to their happiness and how much they belong to the business. So I think the main focus from offer through to that first 90 days is how quickly can you embed them in your culture, embed them into the business to make them love you, I guess. So.
And is that somewhere where, before we move on to Lee, is that somewhere where you are looking for more and different kind of tools and kind of techniques to be able to think on a trend basis of things that maybe people aren't utilising yet? Is that a real focus, especially with the kind of national living wage and national insurance increases that are pending as well? And I know a kind of huge point of debate and discussion.
Yeah, definitely. And I think there's tech available, certainly from whether that's be rotoring through to chatbots. So if someone, for example, has there might be a single parent and they'll need a certain day off or certain times off through the week, is ensuring that they are getting those times off. And through the little things like how do you tell the people in your team and the company a little bit about this new person that's just starting. Little Jimmy's starting tomorrow. Their main hobbies are football. They love eating out, and they enjoy going to book club every Monday night. So there's little conversation starters that everyone will know for when that new person starts the following day, which tech will be able to support with.
Right. Okay. Great. And Lee, I mean, it seems natural to kind of talk to you about the kind of training element from being a kind of a standard bearer for digital training in the industry for the past kind of I'll say more than decade. And you've also seen kind of that a huge amount. You've been early to adopt tech in trends in the space, but also you probably know about what's important and what's not important in terms of the trends in the kind of learning and development space. What are you kind of the key areas for you that we need to kind of keep to what are the fundamentals first and foremost, again kind of bringing it back to the kind of smaller businesses that maybe don't have the bigger budgets, but also what are the kind of trends that you think we should be looking into as well?
I think the piece on the bigger budgets, one of the pieces I've been almost talking a lot about recently is integrated systems. When you talk about a limited budget, particularly I find the larger businesses, because departments are quite insular, quite soulless, that we're not sweating the systems that we already have. So there's a lot more those systems can do and a lot more integrated they can be. So to Oli's point around then from recruitment through to onboarding, ideally it's one system then taking them through. And there's providers now that are offering that recruitment tool, that ATS tool, through to onboarding, through to due diligence training, through to engagement surveys and taking the temperature, and now adding well-being and team communication. So I think there is savings to be made there when we're all looking at those savings. But then this integrated system, so the team don't feel like they're getting bombarded with lots of different systems. So I think that's one that's absolutely key. And one of the things I'm reading more and more around the employee experience is this visibility piece. So it goes back to Oli's point. How do we make the company visible? How do we get the stories out there? I'm just prepping for a storytelling conference that I'm putting together, and there's some fantastic operators out there that excel in that space of telling their story. And that is going to become more and more important as emotional intelligence and the need to connect with your employer. That storytelling piece is going to be really, really important. So how are we sharing stories? Is there a space for, rather than it coming from the top, for everyone to share the stories? So we've got visibility of, I'm proud of working for this business. So that would be I suppose my first piece is that integrated piece that helps a person join and settle in. And I'm sure this stat still holds out, but roughly, if you keep your new employees for 36 days, you'll keep them. So what are you doing in that first 6 weeks? That means that we're looking after our team, that they want to stay and they feel connected and part of that business.
Yeah, I think one thing that came out for a conference this week at Peach 2020 was Roy Ellis was talking about their focus on retention at Mission Mars, and they kind of have distilled it down to a 10% increase in retention, improvement in retention is worth 0.5% of margin. So kind of when you kind of see it from that perspective and you're going from, I think they've gone from 130% to 50%, there's a huge benefit there as well in terms of the, maybe the HR teams maybe struggle sometimes to get the ROI across on these new pieces of software or changes to process that actually have a huge benefit to the business and kind of change that kind of constant churn that we may have. What about specifically on training and learning then, Lee? So, kind of the importance. Obviously integration is crucial to kind of the kind of efficacy of things. What about then in terms of the content or the types of learning, particularly for younger generations that maybe are coming into the industry? We know about kind of shorter form and things, but how much kind of prevalence you put to that?
I think that look, I'm gonna borrow a bit here from my former head of digital, she was in a previous business, and probably a year, 18 months ago, she was talking about these three words, and I see them every now and again, the three A's, and they're becoming more. I think these are becoming more and more relevant. The first one being accessible. So we talk about accessibility, but is it truly accessible on multi-platform? Can they access it on phone, be it Android or iPhone? Can they access it on iPad, computer? So I think that accessibility is really, really key. And people talk about it, but actually, are they able to? Can they get on it beforehand? Do they have to download an app? There's a lot of research saying they don't want to download an app. So is it something they can access without actually having to take space up on their own piece of kit? So that accessibility. The second one that I really think it starts getting interesting is this idea of asynchronous training. So allowing our employees, students, same at college, the ability to complete work at their own pace. And I've got to hold my hands up. This was a bit of a game changer for me because it's always been with big L&D. I'm lucky enough to always have had big L&D teams, and we run programs. We run them at our pace. Yet everyone works at different pace, and I think and Oli will talk about AI in a bit, but that ability to then allow a student or an employee to work at their own schedule, I think, is huge. And I suppose this goes into the third A, which is adaptive, and around how can we customize learning so that we understand prior knowledge. So if they come into us from another business, why do they have to start from scratch? Why can't we actually access what they already know, quick test, and then we reduce what they're having to learn, particularly inductions? And an example I'll give you of this is if you think about the amount of due diligence you have to do as a new starter in hospitality, and depending on your role, it could be up to 14 subjects you have to cover. Why are we still a year on making them go through all that training again for refresh? Why aren't we just giving them a quiz that goes, yep, you've retained that knowledge, so you don't need to do that training again? Because the law doesn't say you have to do it again. The law has to say you have to prove that you've still got that knowledge. And for me, that's adaptive learning of start. When you talk about cost and ROI, that's where it starts getting really interesting of saying, we're not going to sheep dip everyone. We might want them to go through all the culture about the business and how the business works. But if they know how to pour a pint, they know how to cook a T-bone, let's not teach them again.
Yeah, no,
I think those three you'll see more and more: accessible, asynchronous, and adaptive.
Great, it's interesting what you said there about the amount of apps that you got to download. I mean, we are literally reviewing it at the moment. And we're like, download this app for this, and then this app for this, and then this app for this. And it's like, geez, how many? I think you've got like 7, 8 apps you've got to download for your first day. It just gets almost too confusing. How do you make sure it's streamlined and minimize the number of apps or platforms that they've got to use to make it all in one?
Yeah, and that does link to this freedom to switch off piece. And I mean, if you take Australia, for example, and now passed it as law, but I recently did an engagement survey of teams saying, I want to be able to switch off, and I don't want to have to download all this many apps and be buzzed all the time. And in businesses where they've managed to integrate it into a single one, I do think that's coming our way.
I think I know I said I'd try and keep my opinions to a minimum, but I think this is one bit where I think we definitely seen a change over the past kind of 10 years in terms of there's certain businesses want an app. I always question what is driving the desire for an app. For the reasons that you mentioned, notifications is typically the driver. Is that really what you want when there's other ways to notify people now as well through a platform via a text message or WhatsApp message through another app? So, you can use, if you've got one that's driving notifications, you can push notifications into that app and have one place for it rather than 2 or 3. So I think it's kind of questioning that, and is it kind of more of with the right possible for the right reasons, but more of a kind of an egotistical thing to kind of have our own app on an app store and see it as like a kind of a chest out kind of thing. And in reality, web apps and browsers now have got so much more capability within them and often the UX is better, I think it's and it will bring costs down as well typically. So I think that those are kind of from a supplier's point of view, I think are the kind of the things I would definitely jump on what you're saying, because there's definitely having an app comes with its challenges for sure as well. So so I think 3 things for people to note down there: the accessibility, asynchronous learning, and adaptive. On the asynchronously, one thing that interests me, it's a little bit kind of boring, but to an extent, but is how you pay people when they work asynchronously, because asynchronously sometimes comes with a, with the risk of people doing content at different times that you may not want them to do it, and do they do it at work or at home? And I know there's a big challenge in terms of wage,
it's a big challenge. It will always be a grey area in employment law, and I think there is an element of this is the training muster, and this is how much we pay to get this done, and whether if you spent less time doing that, then so be it. But I think that comes down to a company policy and working together with ops, with HR and ops, working together and deciding what is our policy on this. Certainly when we were putting in, if I think back to a previous company, when we were putting in optional content, the pickup on it was, take-up on it was absolutely enormous. So people's veracity to want to consume, when they're engaged and they want to consume more knowledge, I think sometimes we label something due diligence and it becomes boring straight away. So if you can make that fun and you get that done, but then you've got optional training or almost reward that comes after that. Certainly in lockdown, we saw that coming out of lockdown when all that nice weather had gone and people were saying, I want to do something. The pickup on learning, in fact, the need, we put more content out in lockdown when people weren't actually were just being paid furlough, was phenomenal and pickup. And then, this is probably going to come later, but if you take the largest learning engine in the world, which is YouTube, people aren't being forced to do that, but particularly the younger generation now are using that's their go-to, and they're choosing to do that. And you look at the uptake. I mean, millions and millions on wiring a plug because there's a need there, but it leads to other interests. So. I do get the challenge, but I do think that's down to decide what's your policy as a business.
Okay, cool. Thanks, Lee. Kind of moving on to kind of human interaction. We touched on notifications there as maybe being an annoyance and a frustration for people, starting to get into that point of maybe where the technology is taking away from human interaction. And I know there's, I suppose, a lot of the conversation around human interaction and tech in hospitality is probably more on team member using a tech for for order at pay and kind of part of the customer experience more so than the employee experience. But how do you make sure that if we are trying to automate and do more things and take advantage of new trends, that we blend that the need for interaction with people? Maybe Oli, with your job title being head of people and engagement, I reckon you've got a good idea about that.
So do you mean kind of operationally, or do you mean kind of like?
Yeah. So the more we're using technology to be able to either communicate on a kind of templated basis or kind of take away certain processes, that maybe is taking away exposure from individuals in a business or in a site. So how do you kind of blend that? What are the challenges in it and what are the benefits to it?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think tech can take away the human element, because you build an emotional connection with a human, and I don't think you can't build an emotional connection with tech or data. That's very much the what, and the people side of things is all around the why. But it's really interesting because having from a people engagement side, we do like a happiness survey every 6 months. So and we've that obviously goes out. We can use AI to kind of extract all the data from it to tell us what are people saying and how they're feeling, which is amazing. But we'll always do a human to human focus groups off the back of that. So we'll spend time with each team rep each manager will go through the results to talk about them, so then they can bring them to life as well. I think, there's communication is so important. So having the right technology internally as your communication platform. We've got 24 pizzerias, 500 staff. Our communication platform, Workplace, we get anything from 95,000 to 115,000 messages every single month through the comms platform. So having regular, frequent communication between teams, but also the transparency of it, to be able to contact people from other restaurants, to contact our founders and training and the people team, etc., is really, really important. I think from a trends perspective, and how I think probably what we need more of is how do we kind of use tech to have continuous performance management and continuous performance conversations. I think that's kind of missing a little bit at the moment. And I think a big piece is well-being. So on this piece of, for example, apps and the amount of apps that our teams are using, how do we make sure that is there an automation where if you're not on shift, it won't give you any notifications? At the moment, we're relying on our teams to turn those notifications off if they're not on shift, but actually that's not happening all the time. And if your manager's on the day off, how do you make sure that the person who's in charge of the restaurant at the time is the person, the go-to contact, not the general manager on their day off? And I think it's something that we're really exploring at the moment, is how do we kind of set some rules and all automations to make sure that people, if they're off work, they are generally off work, as well as other tools to tell us I don't know when people's last day, like they amount of time between days off, the hours between closing and opening, etc. as well. So there's a lot out there that you can utilize. Well,
with those last three examples that you gave, in terms of the kind of making sure people have got the necessary time to recover, time off, and or being communicated when they're working, when they're not working, they're all kind of net new benefits that would enhance the human interaction rather than detract, aren't they? So I think the kind of important thing to note there is the question that I asked maybe kind of leans towards the fact that humans, we're going to lose all interaction. The reality is we're just opening up more opportunity for better interaction, particularly with maybe on a customer basis. Order and pay technology comes with different challenges that certain customers might not want to deal with, but typically there's a choice for people to make now as what they want to do, if they want to speak to a server or not. But within the people side of things, clearly what you're saying is just opening up opportunities for more and better engagement rather than less.
Completely. And I think the tech's enabling us to really kind of go one layer deeper to understand the needs of our teams, and what is the data also telling us. So the data's helping us prioritize what we need to, how we can enhance that team experience, definitely. And it's also taking away a lot of the, I'm about to say boring bits, it's not boring bits, but a lot of the admin that comes along with it, so we can focus doing the fun stuff, spending time with our teams, focus on spending time with our guests, so we're not having to do so much admin. So really, I think tech's enhancing the ability for these human interactions.
Cool, great. And Lee, one of the points there was around continuous performance management. I know that kind of development of people is kind of central to everything you've spoken about for at least for the time that I've known you and beyond that. So what are the kind of trends in that space that maybe would give Oli some hope that there's opportunity within performance management within the sector? Or again, what are the fundamentals that people need to be doing? Again, it's even without technology, what are the things and the principles they should be following?
Well, I think I probably agree with what you both said in terms of how we maintain that healthy balance between tech and human interaction. I think it's an enabler. I thought it was fascinating, the research that Bills did recently, saying that most of their clientele, being the younger age bracket, actually didn't want to interact with the server and wanted to use. Let them use whichever. Let the guests choose whichever they'd rather use. And I'll come on to that question about performance management, but for me as well with training when it comes to tech is choose what you believe can be delivered better using technology, online learning or video based or whatever, and which leaves you the time to really spend on the face to face. I'm a big believer that coaching will never be delivered as well online as it is face to face. But in terms of teaching people to coach and then actually coaching people, quite sure there's a space for it. But there's certain skills and certain topics that will always require that human interaction, in my opinion. So I think it's then that it doesn't have to be a panacea for everything. It doesn't have to be a catch-all. It's choosing which medium works best for what you're teaching or what you want to cover. But when you talk about performance management, I think there's a really interesting growth area here in terms of when we talk about, whenever you talk about PDPs or personal development plans, quite often people just get a bit nervous because they don't truly know how to write one. Where tech can help in this area for me is this constant appraisal process and not having to have appraisal just once a year, but this whether it's one-to-one and capturing one-to-ones and then that development need in there, and the system being able to then help put it onto a PDP, suggest a number of solutions to that. And we've got this constant growth through performance management. And I don't mean performance management from a negative view. And Jamie, I'm going back to the early days of CPL when we were designing this. And the main reason we were designing it is when it was on paper and a line manager left, most of it was lost. And this is a problem, probably still a problem now. So the whole idea of having that part of going back to the integrated system and it's all in one place, and we can look at how that is progressing and someone knows how they can develop themselves, and we're signposting, if this is where you want to get to, it's a meritocracy in the business, and this is where you want to get to, this is the skills you need to have, and this is how we're going to check those skills. And again, I'll go back to my the previous lady I mentioned in HR Digital was saying, we almost see a subject of teaching it once and then it's done. Well, if I go to the coaching bit I mentioned, if we're teaching someone to be a coach, whether they're going through a qualification or not, it's not just something you do once. You do it a number of times. Or whether we're teaching someone to do end of day and end of week on the back office system, or we're teaching chefs to fillet fish. It's how do you then keep growing that skill and then recording it, and they know what they've got to do. And the much bemoaned apprenticeships for me, although they're too long, they're quite good at that. It's saying we're not going to touch a subject once. We're going to grow that skill through, and a lot of apprenticeships now. I mean, I've just done my master's online, the whole thing online. I can't say I enjoyed it, but I did the whole thing online, and that it felt to me that colleges have really grabbed the idea of using technology, or some of the colleges, more modern online colleges have grabbed the idea of using a lot of things we've talked about already. And growing that learning through the whole program. So that would probably long answer, Jamie, but the piece that PDP for me is systems can make this so much better, not so pedantic or so binary.
I think the kind of key thing there as well, again, just on a fundamental basis, is just having a kind of a central point of record, whether that is a really developed piece of software that gives you lots of features and functionality and richness, or just a record of something that's been written down and people can remember when they move on. You know, that doesn't have to be something which is super complex, but is something to build on as well. So, cool. We'll come on to AI in a second. I just wanted to kind of maybe go a little bit more into thinking of trends in and around, or maybe desires in and around kind of integration in a little bit more detail, because one area that you probably touched on some of those opportunities, Oli, in terms of linking rotors to kind of comms platforms and making sure that things are blocked at certain times. From our world, we're working with our colleagues in Rotor Ready to be able to kind of block people on shifts or warn on shifts if people aren't trained effectively or skill levels aren't maybe to the required level based on experience and those type of things. Maybe some kind of levels of integration that haven't been thought of before because that kind of full picture hasn't been there, particularly when it comes to the kind of front of house stack of content of data as well. Are there any things that are kind of the holy grail for you of trends where you'd be like, or maybe not even a trend, but as a desire where kind of data or functionality that would kind of unlock something for you that is a current frustration? Oli, over to you. I know it's a bit of a tough one as well, but I'm sure you've got a few.
Probably going to elaborate on my last point is so at the moment we use Workplace as our comms platform. Obviously, we have Team Taylor, Rota Ready, Workplace, and then we have various other apps that our team will use for like safety and all that jazz. But as most people are probably aware, Workplace is closing down, so we partnered with Woolley. So they're fairly new in the UK actually, and they're trying to do the full piece. So what they've got is, firstly, Workplace is 2 apps. So you have like your chat app, and then obviously your feed app. So All Brave is everything on one app, which makes so much sense because on Workplace at the moment we do have like a training group on there, and it's the second most used group on Workplace, but yeah, we don't have any of our training on there because it's in sideways. So, so merging those two together just makes sense. And then they've also got like financial well-being, to-do lists. They link in obviously with Rota Ready, so you'll be able to see your rota and your schedule in there. So it's kind of like, they're building a really, really good end-to-end platform, and where then they can integrate with other platforms as well is really powerful. But I think the opportunity does kind of come to this kind of talent management piece. So where we just said then about the the yearly review is, it's quite old now, and it's an old way of doing things. How do we have this continuous performance conversations? And is it just reflecting on 1 or 2 or 3 things from the previous month, and then what we focus on for the next 2 or 3 months? So how do we tie in those performance conversations into a bit of a talent map to understand where our high performers are versus performers who might need some improvement? So then you can look at the succession planning. Now, I've worked closely with succession planning, but it's always been done on an Excel spreadsheet. But how do we bring that into our learning, essentially? So I think that's the opportunity. Hopefully, someone's listening today that might be able to give us some recommendations. But I do think that's an opportunity. So how can we make sure that we're kind of using those data-driven decisions for the right decisions in terms of moving our people either to bigger sites or promotions?
Yeah, it's certainly good to you kind of reaffirming our roadmap choices, Oli. So that's a good thing. The things you're talking about there, Lee, the kind of reframing kind of the same point, but maybe slightly differently. If when you go into that the next your next role, what are the kind of trends that you're going to be looking to take advantage of as soon as you land? What are the things that maybe you haven't been utilised before that you think I need to kind of tap into this thing that I haven't kind of maybe explored as much before?
Yeah, I agree with Oli. I mean, in my last role, that idea, using hot shifts was huge. TGI were first lead the way years ago with this in terms of improving the ability to be able to share open shifts across different stores or businesses, and then be able to grab them. But adding in that level of, but you can't take it if you're not at this level of development. So I think that is going to be key, and that there are some fantastic systems out there. But again, for me, sorry to be stuck. It's not saying that's another new provider. It's look at the provider you've got. Is it on a roadmap, or are they already doing that? And I think then one of the things I will be looking at is this. Marketing are really good at using, I can't believe I've just said that, but marketing are really good at using systems and sentiment analysis and metrics. I think we're a little bit behind in HR, getting better, but using data metrics to make data-driven decisions. And what's the sentiment analysis from our guest? Absolutely, in terms of what we should be training and what the team needs to be doing. What's sentiment analysis from our team? What are they saying in the engagement surveys? But what's the actual sentiment meaning, and what's the advocacy for something, and what's the silent pieces not saying? And are we just accepting that people like the culture? And there's a lot of backslapping going on for retention coming out at the moment. The whole industry in recession or uncertain times or ridiculous budgets, retention comes down. So the hospitality industry turnover is now down below 100% for the first time as long as I can remember. So great that people's retention is coming down, but that's almost a given now. What's your trend? What are you trending in terms of where you were? What interventions are you putting in, and how's that affecting retention? And but then linked to that, Jamie, is what problems is that throwing out? So in the previous company I was in for a long time, we were fantastic at developing people through to GM because we were buying more businesses and we needed more GMs. They and a number of companies now have got a different problem. They don't need as many GMs. So how are you going to retain people with really good talent that you haven't got the next role for? And if we take companies famously that are good at this, like Tesco, that are really good at horizontal promotions, how are you developing your people across different functions and understand different functions? And that, again, for me, technology can help and go, okay, we might not have a vertical promotion for you, but with the skills you've got, or mapping, using technology to map skills, actually, could we promote you horizontally so that you're more rounded or you have more skills when a job does come available? And I think that's going to be something I'm looking at or spending more time on in the next role. So I think that there are companies, when they do that, that person is a lot more suited when they do get promoted because they've had that more rounded development, not just for a GM or a chef or an area manager.
Yeah, interesting. I think it also kind of highlights the importance of hospitality kind of increasing its maturity to become a better employer generally in the way that, like you say, other industries kind of do and would support people in that way. That maybe it highlights the opportunities to stay in the industry longer, as well. Cool. We'll move on to AI. I think there was almost a segue, Lee, and I thought this is perfect. It's kind of a segue, and you moved on a little bit. So I'm going to have to claw it back a little bit. But I think as a subject matter, again, the conference that I was on Monday, as you'd imagine, it's, for senior leaders in the industry, there's a constant kind of point of discussion. But I think for a lot of people, it doesn't necessarily feel like the most natural thing to add into hospitality generally, unless maybe you're talking about tech. But even then, it maybe is a little bit more abstract as to what is possible and what is feasible. So, Oli, I know you've kind of made your first foray into this space relatively recently. Could you maybe explain a little bit as to what that is and what that looks like, and we go from there?
Yeah, so we built an AI chatbot named Joshua. It's called Joshua because that was our founder's favourite film is War Games, and there was a very smart computer, I think from the 60s, who was also called Joshua. So we use it. Basically, Joshua is essentially a digital teammate, so you can contact him. It's connected into Workplace through our chat, so you can contact him whenever you want, every single day, any time of the day, and you can ask him anything about Pizza Pilgrims. So if you want to know how to make a margarita, he'll share the menu spec with you, a video of how to make the margarita. If you want to know about our policies, if you might want to know the maternity policy, ask Joshua, and Joshua will tell you the maternity policy. So we've stored all our knowledge in a OneDrive folder, essentially, and then using ChatGPT, Joshua will when he's asked, will get the information, and then it will give you the answer. So it's been absolutely amazing. And he also sends out, so we've automated some broadcast messages as well. So every Wednesday, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, he'll send out shift broadcasts. So any open shifts that are open or rota ready, he'll send out a message. So any waiter shifts, for example, that waiter will receive those open shifts. So then that waiter will be able to contact the general manager to say, hey, yeah, I'd like to take that shift. There's weekly messages to every manager for birthdays that week, just to remind them that there's someone in the team with a birthday. The same with kind of work anniversaries. If you've got promotion, he'll send out your new details, wish you luck. So he's really this human, which isn't really a human, who will give you these kind of like nice little cherries in terms of, congratulating you on your promotion, but also just answering anything. And it's receiving probably about 100 messages a week from our teams, and that is mainly the top kind of theme is food specs. So there's food specs, there's operational questions such as how do I change the till roll? I'm able to tell you how you can change the till roll, to where do I order new menus from, where do I order staff uniform from. But it's been pretty amazing to see how he's now kind of understanding our tone of voice as well. So he's kind of got this real kind of Pizza Pilgrims character. Things like someone asked, we've got a new opening in Chelsea. It is probably my favourite response that he's been able to do. Someone asked, how do I pronounce each of our pizzas? So obviously someone was worried potentially about not, pronouncing them wrong. And he's basically put margarita, and he's literally put marg-ar-ita. So he's really kind of helped them on how to use that pronunciation. So it's been absolutely great, and sends out weekly news to any company updates we send out on a Monday morning. So I think, he's certainly taken a lot of the administration away from what we were doing previously, just so we can enhance that user.
I suppose as well, because I suppose from a outside, and initially you'd be thinking it'd be asking around maybe more HR-based questions and policy questions and things, but on the basis that it's food specs is number one, I'd imagine that's actually making more of an impact on saving time at a site level rather than at a support centre level. So actually even a kind of an even better impact for the teams.
Operationally, yeah, 100%. I think there's obviously, there are certain limits. So if someone asks about allergens, for example, he'll just say, hey, go and speak to the manager on shift. And there's obviously keywords in there if Joshua's not a doctor. So if someone's potentially ill or injured, to say, hey, go and speak to your manager. But for example, he'll know all the calories per pizza, and that's quite frequent, because a team member might not know what the calorie count are on a certain pizza, so he'll just quickly ask Joshua because the customer's asked, and then he can answer that question there and then. So certainly operational efficiencies he's been able to drive with as well.
Brilliant. And Lee, over to you. Is there what exposure have you had to it in terms of AI, and what are you looking for it to improve? And you're on mute before you start talking.
I'm basically just going to plan to steal whatever Oli's done, because I love the sound of that. Look, very little. The previous company, were dipping our toes in AI, although some businesses don't know they're using AI because some of the systems that already use it. Where we were playing with the idea of using chatbots to help with your training. So if you didn't know how to do something, you had to go at it. But then the chatbots would help you say, well, you've all seen it. Here's a better answer, or have you tried doing this, or let me steer you to this video. I mentioned YouTube earlier, but I was asking my son how he learns how to do something, and almost the answer is YouTube. Duh. So what those bots can do as well is steer people to the right videos to be watching, worthwhile, that we've highlighted. I think, again, it links to what I said earlier, a bit greater personalization. So how do you personalize that training to that person, even just by the power of using someone's name and role and knowing what they already know, so it doesn't make them do something again. We know bite-sized content is absolutely huge, and AI helps with that in terms of breaking something down. Whether you agree with the research on attention spans reducing, I don't think it's necessarily attention spans reducing. It's just a sheer amount of information that our teams have thrown at them that they didn't used to have. So how do you make it that here's the information? It's almost the Moscow model. Here's what you must know. Here's what you should know, and here's what you could know if you want to, and then break it down. Here's what you absolutely must have to do, but here's additional information should you be interested. So I think that's the piece for me. But Jamie, I was reading a really interesting, no, it wasn't really interesting, but there was an article last night on AI, and the stats were 20% of businesses have formally started with AI, 55% plan to. So talking about a year where it's going to be transformational is that year, and I think that where there's companies that are reluctant, what you will see this year is almost AI plus. So AI plus cloud, or AI plus data for data metrics improving, AI plus security. I think you'll see a lot of that of people starting to embrace it because they realise it on from ChatGPT and on from chatbots what it can actually do when you add it into some of your existing systems, and saying, how could AI improve this, or systemize this, or speed this up, or accelerate this? So I think you'll see a lot of that.
I agree. I suppose from working in the software business, I feel like I should maybe add a little bit to it, because I think there's AI is in a lot of products already, as in one way, shape, or form. And I think now, obviously, with the kind of broader consumer awareness of it growing, it's kind of feeling like it's like kind of adoption time, and now we're kind of moving through the adoption curve of it. I think the things to look out for me are definitely points in and around time saving. Be that like you say, being out having a chatbot and a resource kind of pool to draw from and support teams with. But equally, from a learning perspective, is in and around content creation as well. So be that creating a survey quickly, not knowing what to do. In our product now, you can get a survey written automatically, an appraisal written automatically that you can edit even as a starting point. And I think for an industry which has struggled with, and still does struggle with, time to do some of those things, I think that is something that for people teams, or even businesses that don't have people teams, that kind of can be a really kind of strong asset. I think the thing now is going to be around more content creation to help learning as well. So, Oli, you touched on it with some of the bits as well that you mentioned within the chatbot. There's definitely kind of scope within that to do more. So yeah, I would say kind of that time saving point is definitely the case, as well as the fact that smart scheduling and things within products like Rota Ready, is driven by this AI principles to it. So it's there's definite opportunities on those points we talked around unlocking more potential through data. Right, we've got a few minutes left. I'm going to ask one final question before I wrap up. We might feel free to touch on something you said before, if you want to. But for those that are watching and listening, what is the one trend that you would recommend an operator focuses their attentions on once Christmas is out of the way, perhaps, that you think is kind of the most beneficial for the challenges that we face currently, or the opportunities, not to be all negative about it? Lee, I'll start with you.
I will go back to what I said. I think this whole idea of asynchronous adaptive learning, or learner-centric learning, in terms of, and I put my hands up, hugely guilty of this in all the success I've had over the years of of saying everyone will sheep dip and do this training this way at this time. And I think there's huge benefits of time, money, and engagement if we actually can personalise it to the learner and let them go at their speed. If they already know it and they're a fast learner, let them get on with it. Don't hold them back because the training team want to schedule it at this time on this day. I think it's got masses of legs in it.
Cool. Oli?
I don't know. I'm going to be quite broad and just say just overall employee experience. So where are the pain points in terms of your employee experience, understanding why people are leaving, certainly within the first 90 days? How can you use tech to be able to make kind of better informed decisions, and then using it just to enhance the whole kind of employee experience?
Great, thanks. I think but kind of situationally, there's going to be businesses have so many different challenges, be it locationally, the type of business they are, the type of people they employ, the seasonal challenges that they will face. I think it's a kind of, albeit broad, I think it's a valid point to kind of people should use tech where it is most relevant to them based on the pain that they have now, rather than kind of chasing the next trend, which might not be hugely relevant to where they're at in their kind of life cycle or journey. So cool. So I've summarized a couple of points down. I think firstly, I think tech is definitely supportive to us, particularly if we're talking around kind of these maybe newer kind of points around data-driven things and AI-driven things. It's there to support. It's not meant to detract. So making sure that you've got the resources and the focus to make the most of that, and not just thinking it's going to take all of your people processes or people interaction away, because if you do that, it's going to fail miserably and it won't support. I think the kind of key thing for me is around us unlocking talent as a result of that as well. So more use of data unlocks people from a talent perspective, but also from it helps support as well. You mentioned, Ollie, those examples around giving people colour around what people's lives are like, and therefore rotas reflect that. That is data that's really important to kind of unlock talent in a different way. And then AI, I suppose the key thing is it doesn't have to be hugely scary. It can be as simple as a chatbot with a name, not to kind of oversimplify it. But it's, that has a great personality, and again, with a kind of personal element to it. And people definitely shouldn't be scared of interacting or asking their kind of software providers around how it's utilising will improve for them, which I'm sure they're already being told multiple times daily already. But I would thank you both for your time and your expertise, appreciate your time, and we'll leave it there. So thanks for everyone who's watched and dialed in, and I'm sure if you've got any other questions, let us know.
Thanks, Jamie. Thanks,
Thank you very much. Cheers. Bye bye.